Welcome back to the Cybernetic Communism Conversation. I'm Yohanan Ben Zion, a voice crying out in the wilderness for a technological New Jerusalem. And I'm going to read, rather than paraphrase, in this presentation. Mostly read. This presentation was titled The Bourgeois AI Takeoff, the Fruit of a Poisoned Revolutionary Tree. This is an analysis of transhumanism spectrum concepts, which are bourgeois. They can just be dismissed basically as bourgeois. And a bourgeois AI takeoff currently underway, I think well underway, which must also be understood as, of course, a thing of elitist in character, but also a thing intending to be revolutionary. This ubiquity of transhumanism spectrum thought among the ruling elites, who are highly technocratic, is not limited, of course, to transhumanism. It's encapsulated well by the acronym TESCREAL. TESCREAL stands for transhumanism, extropianism, singularitarianism, cosmism, rationalism, and effective altruism, and long-termism. And all of these pretty closely related ideologies reflect to slightly varying degrees bourgeois ideology. There's really no, you can really not find people who identify with those things who are proletarian in character. These things are incredibly influential, and they're generally viewed as a novel outgrowth of 21st century late stage capitalism. But I would like to submit a more critical examination of U.S. political history, looking at these technocrats, these bourgeois technocrats, as this malformed thing, and fundamentally a fruit of a poison tree. And in doing so, perhaps reflect on the notion that they might be a direct descendant of the historical and ideological collapse of an American and global ultra-left. And I'll explain this further, that this bourgeois AI takeoff set of circumstances is essentially fueled by a revolutionary, even Promethean energy, and how we can understand this by a phenomena in U.S. history called Browderism, which is something particular to proletarian philosophy. Earl Browder was a capable and learned figure in communist history until around 1944, when the U.S. Ostensible support of Soviets, although they left 15 million additional Soviets to die fighting to the death without supporting them, fighting the Germans. But the ostensible support kind of broke Earl Browder's brain. It's a little more complicated than that, but it kind of broke his brain, making him believe that instead of the United States government being dismantled and replaced by a Soviet-style government, that reform of that government through incremental measures was possible. An extremely stupid thing to believe for anyone, whether you're a communist turned liberal or just liberal. And so this strategic embrace of class collaboration and a fundamentally flawed institutional reform filtered through and effects of this kind, that is to say, an ultra-left phenomena of different kinds, with revolutionary intent, but insufficient understanding and praxis to support that, filtered through an intervening generation of um, um, apolitical technical geniuses in the Browder line, and then further down in the Browder line resulted in an accelerationist worldview that seeks radical change only through capital-controlled means. A an insane thing, a truly insane thing to do. This bourgeois AI takeoff that's currently underway is hastening the omnicide. It's making the world more unlivable and also worsening the conditions that we could generally refer to as the enslavement of man by man, wage slave conditions, maltreatment of human beings. And there's other figures that we could point to besides the Browder family who represent this kind of malformed ultra-leftism being transformed into highly neoliberalistic tech accelerationism. But I think that the Browder family is an interesting entree into this. The foundation of this ideological pipeline is the failure of the American communist movement around the time of the Second World War. Prior to that time, they were doing good work to sustain an anti-revisionist, militant, and genuinely proletarian project. In the case of Earl Browder, who was a general secretary of the Communist Party of the United States, before that time a substantial force in proletarian undertakings, serves as a quintessential example of the aforementioned malformation. Browder's early political life represented genuine commitment, on the whole, to the abolition of private wealth and the establishment of a people's government through a direct class struggle. This impulse was anchored in the Leninist demand for an organized vanguard capable of seizing state power and restructuring the political economy. The malformation occurred around the time of the Second World War and the U.S. involvement and the U.S.-Soviet alliance, which itself should not have been a bad thing, but of course the United States was no real ally to the Soviet Union, as I said. It proved to be a significant ideological fracture point, harming world communist efforts very much. Browderism was quite harmful. Not nearly so harmful as maybe the events described in Grover Furr's book, Khrushchev Lied, and some of his other books, which broke the back of world communism, kind of diminished participation by about 50%. But nevertheless, a significant harm done. And this was formalized, Browder's shift was formalized in the 1944 dissolution. He used his power as general secretary to dissolve the CPUSA and turn it into a communist political association. And this, I think, is an example of this major failing that is capitalist realism in an early form, the major failing of capitalist realism that would allow U.S. Personalities, bourgeois personalities of some renown, unfortunately, to imagine that this bourgeois AI takeoff, which is worsening conditions for workers and hastening the climate crisis, is somehow an acceptable set of strategies, because they do not imagine that there are any strategies other than those that operate within this kind of neoliberalistic framework. Browder argued that due to the wartime alliance between the U.S. and Soviet Union, which is we now know, and was pretty well understood then, was really bad faith on the part of the U.S. U.S. capitalism could now be, from henceforth, according to Earl Browder and many people at that time, could now be fundamentally reformed from within. So a change of government would not be necessary to build a Soviet-style government in the U.S., but this could be done by negotiating with the rightists within the government. Um, um, uh, that's a painfully stupid thing to believe. Um, and so Browderism, as it's known, was a tremendous sabotage of the revolutionary project, as I said. Um, and So the poison here is a substitution of People's War, a direct revolutionary struggle, being replaced by things like non-militant institutional posturing and maneuvering and tailing the Democratic Party, a thing that the CPUSA has done quite faithfully for the last 7 decades. Um, and This substitution of a goal from the abolition of private wealth, a thing that would create a humane and sustainable world, to the thing that is most decidedly bourgeois, but that most people who call themselves progressives or even socialists embrace or are a little too accepting of, a reform of the state capitalist government. Browder, for this insane behavior, was expelled in 1945, and this type of class collaboration was officially repudiated by the real communists in the Communist Party at that time. But even though he was thrown out, and they said no at the time, the essential ideology of gradualism and non-militant acquiescence described to the existing far-rightist political structure. The United States was as imperialist and anti-communist then as it is now, in most respects. It remains a deep and unflinching modus operandi of much of the U.S.'s so-called left. Those kinds of people who describe themselves as progressive. The ultra-left impulse in this Browderist type effect remained. The desire for some radical events and changes was retained, but it was intellectually and operationally severed from the means of revolutionary action. And this severance is a thing that has generated this bourgeois AI takeoff, and I'll contrast that in a moment with proletarian AI takeoff. Reflecting more on the Browders, the next stage of the Browder family line and involved a second generation. All three of Earl Browder's sons became distinguished research mathematicians, which is interesting. So Browder, in his early life, was a serious proletarian political philosopher and activist, and then he became reviled by serious proletarian political philosophers, and then his children chose to distance themselves from this, but doing things that would generally be held to be of some academic interest. This shift from a focus on militancy and political economy to a technological work, to technical work, it sets the stage for what occurs in the next generation and in the USA's history as well, which is a close analog. The work was good. The work that they did should not be criticized. And it's a kind of work, high-level systemic and academic work in valid technical disciplines that would be necessary for the building of something like the proletarian AI takeoff, or the things that would allow for a proletarian AI takeoff, such as the CyberSyn project, centrally planned AI-run economy. The CyberSyn project existed in a time when advanced computing was a very simple thing compared to what it is now, but nevertheless, a centrally planned technological planned economy was being built at that time. It was sabotaged with great violence by Augusto Pinochet and his forces, which were themselves the forces of the highly fascistic, anti-communistic United States. But by divorcing their intellectual prowess, these second generation of Browders, from any a proletarian action or focus, they created a kind of ideological vacuum that reflects the history of the CPUSA and the history of the United States in some interesting ways. This revolutionary drive was sublimated into a technical mastery unrelated to the People's War. And now consider that this vacuum then produced a third generation, grandchildren and great-grandchildren who are also well-known, coming of age during the present-day neoliberal and neoconservative imperial eras of the United States. They inherited a focus on some kind of radical systemic overhaul, but in this corrupted capitalist realist form, a corrupted set of methodologies, this Browderist fingerprint that dictates that such change must occur from above rather than below, from the bourgeois ruling elites rather than from the workers and the people, and so that's a non-starter. It's not possible. It's not something that's happened. Changes that have been brought about are attributed to such forces by liberals, but the changes are actually the result of workers demanding them and fighting for them. So let's describe how this relates to transhumanism and this TESCREAL constellation of ideas. The TESCREAL cluster represents a full synthesis of this strange lineage. It is the application of this ultra-left type impulses, revolutionary Promethean design. And the desire for a wholly new post-scarcity world where the capitalist economic system is jettisoned, but not really, and even a post-human world where humans are replaced by androids and beings in silico. All of this is painfully cobbled together because of these constraints of capitalist realism. It's Rube Goldbergian. It's in that overwrought respect. So this TESCREAL ideology manifests in this Rube Goldian political program, which I'll now describe a little bit more. The goal is fundamentally revolutionary. Singularitarians promise longevity, escape velocity, effectively biological immortality. Extropians focus more on superintelligence. Long-termists promise saving trillions of future lives with their techno-utopian stratagems. These are goals that seem to hold a genuinely revolutionary capacity, but they, of course, they're not capable of this, but they believe themselves to be, and they are also goals that exceed the reforms of social democracy or or the capitalist realist equivalents as they are described. Um, um, the they go far beyond these worlds of things that are allowed within the structural capitalistic political economy. These means are bourgeois. Instead of seizing the means of production, open sourcing AI models and seizing means in the more conventional ways for the workers. They seek to build or acquire them through venture capital, market disruptions, such as they are, and the accelerated accumulation of private wealth. The revolutionary energy is channeled into unhelpful market competition. And the solution to global risks, of course, foremost among these is climate change, is not a genuinely political economic transformation, but a technological band-aid that can be deployed within the existing profit structures. And also, it's important to say that what these people are mostly engaging with really is a limited hangout phenomena. They pretend to be interested in this techno-utopian outcome, as long as it's long term, right? Long-termism, as long as that outcome is not visible on the horizon. If it becomes visible on the horizon, they drop back and punt into safer neoliberal type territory. And this is the thing that you can see these people doing. I witnessed people in this community do this, like seen them do it firsthand. And you can just count hundreds and hundreds who have done this. Hundreds and hundreds who have done this specifically in the last 3 years, with the creation of things like more capable chatbot assistants and the open source chatbot assistants. That's the things that does scare them. Many of these people have gone from being very techno-optimistic in their language to being AI doomers, specifically because of this limited hangout phenomena. And it's important to understand that these people are 99.9% crypto-fascists. They are not supporting a revolutionary outcome, not in practice and not when you more carefully scrutinize their ideology. The result of this, however, because it is very ubiquitous and influential, is a bourgeois AI takeoff driven by the U.S. and Western forces. The superintelligence, very real superintelligent formations that are being built, are not of the kind that we would describe as a proletarian superintelligence, like the people's superintelligence often discussed on this show, or a more historically realized thing that was nevertheless sabotaged by the fascistic United States, a cybersyn-like technological planned economy built from multi-agent systems, steered by mass decentralized collaboration for planning, a truly representative thing, an economically representative thing that could be built today for workers. They're not building anything like this, but they're simply building more private, proprietary, profit-seeking entities that offer little to workers and quite clearly take one step forward in that respect and two steps back by creating. You won't find U.S. People who aren't talking about 996 right now. That is working conditions that you would not envy, working almost all of your waking hours, and and this is under conditions where automation, as many sectors are highly automated, pushing up to being full automated, and the world itself is about to in the process of being experiencing that level of automation because of the existence of AI agents. So why do you have to work more in that framework? Well, you don't. Um, these people are insane. Um, and so this bourgeois AI takeoff is serving to optimize the extractive cruelty and unsustainability of private wealth, functioning largely through the operations of financial capital and empire. And this has the effect of enhancing elite longevity. The multimillionaires, mega millionaires, and billionaires have the opportunity to see a longevity escape velocity. But you, a worker, do not. In fact, you're in quite the opposite situation because you don't have a single payer public health service. So about 100,000 of you workers will die next year under these ongoing pandemic level conditions. And even without that pandemic level conditions, you would have about 70,000 people a year dying because of the lack of a single payer public health service and problems of this kind. This is all by design. The improper response to the pandemic, such as shutting down the airlines, such as things that were, as a Joseph Cotton movie from damn near 100 years ago, where that describes the kind of proto-CDC responding to an outbreak. These skills have been in the tool set for a while. And so not using those skills is a choice, and it's a choice to kill workers, and create larger private fortunes at their expense, at the expense of workers. This bourgeois AI takeoff, most critically, accelerates the capitalist climate apocalypse, a thing which it purports in many of these people's convoluted Rube Goldbergian thinkings and actions to mitigate. So the entire framework becomes what is effectively negative work that's done on the part of these people who are saying that they are helping, taking one step forward and two steps back. And a tremendous amount of revolutionary potential and intellectual resources are dedicated to serving financial capital and empire, or basically just doing make work. This malformed revolutionary impulse is maintained by tremendous violence, as I've already alluded to, because an actual proletarian AI takeoff almost certainly would have come to pass had projects like Salvador Allende in Chile's Cybersyn, the technological planned economy, been allowed to exist. It would have influenced other nations to do the same. They would have built out relevant sectors to do with advanced computing. As a result, we would have already seen a proletarian AI takeoff, sometime maybe perhaps around the year 2000. This was held back pretty specifically by the United States, and pretty specifically so that these clowns, TESCREAL type people, who are neoliberals overwhelmingly, could kind of take credit for doing the things which they're not actually doing, and the things which cybernetic socialists would have done. And so the violent U.S.-backed coup was the genesis against Salvador Allende was the genesis of the neoliberal project in many respects, and the genesis of these terrestrial bad actors. It destroyed the momentum for democratic social cybernetic governance in South America, and created other ideological vacuums which have been filled by capitalist realist bourgeois filth. By eliminating viable non-capitalist paths, the space was cleared for this malformed revolution in terrestrial form, which accepts capitalism's triumph built on the murders of hundreds of millions as its precondition. The lack of a contemporary people's superintelligence being scaled out and built today, because the technical building blocks like open source models for the people's superintelligence, such as Olama hosting open source AI agents of today, or MetaGPT to coordinate that activity across a decentralized autonomous organization built out of this multi-agent system. It demonstrates quite clearly that the impediment is not technological to building a people's superintelligence, but institutional and cultural. And this cultural and institutional environments remains very much Browderized. That's to say, stripped of its real revolutionary potential, convincing so many workers, scientists, and engineers that only market capitalistic projects have any possibility of success or any legitimacy at all. The terrestrial pipeline, as we have described it, is a self-sustaining loop of revolutionary energy corrupted by capitalist realism. The solution lies in a rupture that is neither gradualistic nor market-based, but which fundamentally relinks the radical goal with the popular will. And I believe that should be worked toward building this people's superintelligence. Now, at this point, I'm going to describe a film that I made called Worm, W-Y-R-M, a short film of science fiction kind, that it was basically an extension of a thought experiment. How might this proletarian AI takeoff be transitioned to from the bourgeois AI takeoff with a minimal loss of life? And it describes a quite transhumanistic anarchist cult organization that masterminds the fall of U.S. Financial markets and the capitalist political economy, and in doing so compels the people of the U.S. and of the world to embrace this thing, the people's superintelligence. And in that story, there's a character called Bella the Beluga, who is a beluga whale. This is something that it sounds outlandish, but it kind of could really happen. There have been a substantial amount of research into having machine learning models of beluga communication. So, and a chatbot could can learn beluga, or could very soon learn beluga, and this is not limited to one animal. There's a couple of creatures that would fit this description. Uh, could very soon learn beluga language, so to speak, communicate with a beluga whale, and in this fictional conceit, this occurs, and also this creature is outfitted with things like neural bands on its flippers, and that allow it to interact extensively with the computer as well, creating a kind of thing like that described in the book The Lawnmower Man, where a chimpanzee, through such feedback loops, becomes extremely intelligent. And the reason that I mention all of this is because it's to explore the idea that an outlier event that kind of takes on a human interest kind of dimension is probably the thing that, short of extraordinary trauma, like the polar ice caps melting, causing many cities to go underwater, which is not a wholly unlikely event. And this an outlier event, such as Bella the Beluga in the story, Bella the Beluga, seemingly of their own volition, although influenced by the worm, commands humankind to abolish the military-industrial complexes, particularly that of the USA, and commands humankind to abolish petroleum concerns, particularly those of the USA. And in doing this, this creates a kind of cultural and emotional resonance to things which people would already kind of have tended to embrace, but not really had the political will to bring to pass. A non-market catalyst event. And further in the worm, the counter-revolutionary impulse of the leadership is neutralized, not through any appeals to their conscience, which they have none. Bourgeois are not capable of that kind of reflection, or they would not be bourgeois. But by an external shock and a strategic deception, which convinces them that their further interference and involvement in world affairs is basically impossible, or so far-fetched as to be wholly counterproductive. And this, in the story, is described as a quantum decryption virus, and it's released to make transparency a necessary part of any entity, which basically makes it impossible for corporations or bourgeois governments to continue to function. So this forces a moment of systemic surrender on the part of the bourgeoisie. Then the possibility opens up for massification of advanced computing, and massification more generally. This is a different kind of view, I think, than those of the TESCREAL folks, who are generally, as we said, engaging with a limited hangout, where they have not the impulse to bring their visions to near-term fruition. It's even in the name of some of them, as in long-termism, nonsensical worldview. And so this bourgeois AI pipeline is really a dark reflection of the revolutionary impulse of the North American European descended person, and in some ways of the a poor organization on the part of socialists and cybernetic socialists in the 20th century. Salvador Allende basically chose not to protect his government and people. He thought that the U.S. was bluffing when they said that they were going, as it became clear that they were going to attack him. He was, this is a part of him being a socialist and not a communist. He was elected a cybernetic socialist head of state, and the first Marxist-Leninist type elected head of state. But because of this non-militant impulse, he failed to see the real threats to him, and this led to his demise and the death of millions. The descendants of people who have seen this increasingly malformed revolutionary impulse over the generations now seizing on to what is effectively trickle-down economics with some science fiction jazz thrown in to kind of salt the gumbo, and a bad escape hatch, right? The escape hatch from the capitalist climate apocalypse cannot be a thing that's making the capitalist climate apocalypse worse. And the escape hatch for the thing which is said by these TESCREAL folks to liberate workers cannot be a thing which that political economy is incapable of, right? It's wholly incapable of. In the 20th century, before advanced computing was a part of our lives or even very much conceived of, high automation had swept over many sectors. Farming was already highly automated and is pushing up to being full automated today before anyone had even very much heard of systems theory. Or advanced computing or central computing. If these TESCREAL folks were correct in thinking that a new kind of automation would bring about the liberation of workers, this would have happened on the many other times that high automation became a part of people's lives. Instead, the opposite happened. The workers were disenfranchised, and all of those gains were siphoned into private coffers. So to achieve a humane and sustainable world, we must be dedicated to the building of a humane and sustainable political economy, which itself requires the abolition of private wealth and the fight for said. And this genuinely Promethean energy must be reclaimed for the People's War. This must be done in a timely manner, because we have perhaps 5 years, according to many, many very credible climate scientists, before we go from being mostly in breach of 1.5 degrees of overheating, a thing which climate scientists thought only a few decades ago was a century off, or nearly a century off away, to being the present day reality, 1.5 degrees of overheating. And it's possible that we'll reach 2 degrees of overheating in as little as 5 years. So after that point, we'll have reached a period of human history characterized by runaway overheating and cascading meteorological catastrophes and socio-political catastrophes derived from this chaos. This is not a world that you want to live in. This is something that must be avoided, but it's not possible to avoid it under a bourgeois political economy. And it may not be possible to bring it to pass by the standards of 20th century people's war. We need a people's superintelligence. And we need to understand that advanced computing is the most powerful revolutionary weapon in human history, and that it can be used to build not just a livable world, but the techno-utopian world that these TESCREAL folks ostensibly aspire to.